And now behind the scenes on the making of Terminator. The location, the desolate nighttime streets of downtown Los Angeles on the set of The Terminator, a futuristic action thriller from Hemdale Productions and Orion Pictures. Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger in a very unique role. The film also stars Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn. Based on a screenplay written by James Cameron, the director, and Galen Hurd, the producer, Arnold Schwarzenegger plays the Terminator, a cyborg, part man, part machine, who has only one purpose: to return to the present to prevent the future.
Well, Terminator for me is a very important and a very different role that I've ever played before. First of all, because it is not a barbaric type of a role. It's not with where you show the body or the muscles or so on. It's not a prehistoric type of a character or role. It's futuristic. And I played the villain the first time in my life. And it is playing a robot. I have never done that. So all of the things that the Terminator has are things that are very unique for me, and that's why I was very enthusiastic playing Terminator. And it's a very strong character, and it's a villain, but it is a villain that gets away with being a villain for the audience out there because it's playing a robot and not really a human being.
Michael Biehn plays a hardened guerrilla fighter also sent back to present day from the future to protect the Terminator's unsuspecting victim from the relentless onslaught of the unstoppable killer machine.
All right, listen. The Terminator's an infiltration unit. Part man, part machine. Underneath, it's a hyperalloy combat chassis. Microprocessor controlled, fully armored, very tough. But outside, it's living human tissue. Flesh, skin, hair, blood, grown for the cyborgs.
Look, Reese, I don't know what you want.
Pay attention! I gotta ditch this car. The 600 series had rubber skin. We spotted them easy. But these are new. They look human. Sweat, bad breath, everything. Very hard to spot. I had to wait till he moved on you before I could zero him.
Look, I am not stupid, you know. They cannot make things like that yet.
Not yet. Not for about 40 years.
It's a science fiction action thriller set in the present day, but it has a lot of futuristic overtones, and it involves time travel in the sense that the good guy and the bad guy are both trying to change history. The pivot of all this action is a girl who has no concept when the film begins of what her life will mean in the future. She's a waitress, she's going to college, she's trying to make ends meet, she has a lot of very common problems. She has no idea that these incredible events will impinge on her life. And then when they do, she has to learn to deal with it. And without giving away too much, basically her existence will have a significant event on all of world history in the future. And there's a tremendous desire for one side to have her removed. So they send back the Terminator to terminate her. She's targeted. And the good guys send back their man, and they can only send one guy. So he's got to go up against the almost impossible odds of trying to stop this machine, which cannot be stopped. Arnold, as Terminator, cannot be stopped.
As with any science fiction thriller, special effects play a vital role in the visual excitement and success of the film. And Emmy Award-winning Stan Winston has really devised some unique makeup and special effects for Terminator based on sketches given to him by director James Cameron.
Creator of Terminator effects, basically, is the title. My involvement is that I've basically the head of a large and extremely talented crew that have built and sculpted and put together this initial concept of Jim's.
I never thought the time will come where I will be looking at photographs And I myself would ask myself, is this me or is this the dummy? There was no way of telling the difference. And it was really weird. And only out of 10 times when I was asked the question, I must have been wrong 6 or 7 times. So this is how close this was, or exactly a resemblance of my face and of my head. So it was really amazing. Even in the film, there was no way of telling.
Meet the other star of the Terminator, a 200-pound electronically controlled robot created in the mind of director James Cameron. Built and designed by Stan Winston, the robot stands 6 feet 2 inches tall and has over 1,000 chrome-plated moving parts that were handcrafted by Stan and his staff. Building this mechanical marvel took almost a year from the original idea and initial drawings. Stan and his crew prepare for a scene where the cyborg has been injured in a fiery explosion. Now, this will be the first time the Terminator robot will be tested and filmed in a scene, so everything must work as it was designed to. A final test of all the moving parts are gone over. Stan and his crew must simulate for the cameras that the robot is walking with a limp. It will take a crew of 5 men to operate the robot, all moving in tandem to create the illusion for the cameras.
Working with the robot was a real experience, and it was very fascinating, and I just must applaud everything that they did. You know, they worked as hard as I did. It was also very strange because you have lots of people operating a puppet, and the director, I mean, it's not a real reality, per se, that you can just look at and respond to. You have to create it for yourself and then respond to it. And instead, you've got a director saying, okay, here he is. Okay, now he's getting up, and now he's going, and now he's coming. You know, you have a little hand to work with too often. But it was very interesting. Certainly, you know, one of the nicer things about the film.
Terminator, I must say, out of my career of a short 15 years, is the most exciting project that I've been involved with, and I hope will be extremely successful. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for everyone to see, and I was extremely fortunate in that I had such an amazingly talented group of guys to work with, whose names will remain off the screen, and no one will ever know who they are, because I'm taking all the credit.
It really tested everything that I had. I felt completely exhausted when it was over. There was also a level of belief that was a little bit scary, because we were working nights, 10 weeks at least of all-night shooting and coming home at dawn and trying to sleep, and it just wears down your spirit, so that by the end of it, you know, I just was so sort of caught up in really believing it and just undone by it.
One of the really nice things I think about the Terminator is that it is an action movie, and I think it's an excellent action movie. And I think James Cameron is really good, very talented young director. I think he's going to be a big star. I think he's very talented, and I think he really writes action well and directs it well. And so it's a good action picture, and so I think people should see it, and a lot of people see it just for the action alone. But on top of that, Linda and I's relationship in the movie gives us a chance to stretch a little bit and work as actors, not just running away from a robot. It's not what the movie's about, running away from a robot. It is, but at the same time, there's a good story, an excellent story here, you know, the Terminator, and it gives us a chance to play a lot of very good scenes as actors.
I came across time for you, Sarah. I love you. I always have.
I think Michael has a very promising future. He did a phenomenal job with the character. It's a very complex character because at the beginning we look at him as a villain, because he's going through the same movements and the same pattern of action as the Terminator. But then he has to change and become the hero, and then beyond the hero, he has to become the romantic lead, if you will. So there's a transmigration of the character that happens. Michael did a phenomenal job with that. Really understood the character. He brought a lot of intensity to it. I think that the chemistry between the two of them is absolutely perfect. Run you up from further back. Let's start you back a little more by the burners. Linda, you too, so that Michael can switch over to this position.
Okay.
Okay? Ooh,
Okay, so
ankle's
it's okay
going,
then
huh?
if I just come in?
No, the backs of my legs hurt.
No.
That's all right.
Oh, that's good. That's because they haven't had enough
It's okay
exercise.
then, we don't have to match this, so I can come and
Right,
like this?
exactly, right. And then Linda, just toss that pipe just down in here, okay? On the ground. Okay, let's see it again. Do it a little faster, too. Terminator's coming. And action.
Action.
Cut.
Cut.
Don't go away. When we return, we'll show you what goes into the filming of just one high-action stunt scene of a motion picture, when the making of Terminator returns right after this.
And action.
Rarely do viewers ever get the opportunity to witness the painstaking preparation and special effects production that goes into just one action scene of a motion picture. We're about to show you, in capsulized form, the production efforts of over 50 crew members during 2 nights of shooting for a scene that will last approximately 90 seconds in the finished film. Now, scenes are shot in segments. This means that each scene in the picture is usually shot from 2 or 3 different angles. Well, in this one scene, Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn will be filmed at least 3 times from at least 3 different angles. And who said being a movie star was fun and glamorous?
The scene in general consists of a chase on foot down an alley where the guy and the girl are running from the killer cyborg from the future, and presumably he can gain on them because he's faster than they are. So the hero's got to come up with something fast. So he uses his shotgun to blow up the gas tank of a car, which creates a sort of wall of fire, and he jumps in his car and starts backing up, and Arnold's character, the Terminator, comes leaping through the fire and punches through the windshield to get the girl.
And roll sound.
107, Charlie, cover mark, AMC camera, mark.
There we go. And action.
Get in, Ken. Cut.
As you can see, every precaution is taken to ensure that the fire created by the special effects team can be easily controlled. Almost every major motion picture today which incorporates hazardous stunts uses stuntmen to double for the star. Well, here, stuntman Frank Orsatti doubles for Arnold in a fiery leap to the hood of the moving car. Another dangerous stunt successfully completed.
On this movie, I was not about to do 100% of my stunts. The stunts were very, very dangerous on this film, and this is why I was not attempting to try to do it like in Conan, you know, where I do my own stunts.
However, when the camera needs a close-up of the leading actor, a double cannot be used. Arnold must actually hang on to the hood of the car as it races backward. And to create the illusion that the Terminator is partially on fire, the special effects team sprays 2 interacting chemicals over Arnold's body to create the smoke effect. Then, at the last minute, a rubber cement-type material is brushed onto his clothing and placed on fire. And the cameras begin to roll. Then there are illusions that even Arnold's massive strength can't create. Now, this is when the mechanical effects team, headed by veteran Roger George, is called in to create movie magic. He's also in charge of creating the fire and explosions in the film. Jim and Roger discussed the operation of a specially designed pneumatic arm and fist that will be used for the first time in a motion picture to create the illusion that Arnold is punching through a windshield. Everything must go right on the first try, so the stunt is rehearsed and timed over and over again. There's no margin for error. Timing is everything. One miscue by Arnold or any of the crew would mean that the scene would have to be shot again, and the windshield in the car would have to be replaced. A very costly and time-consuming process thing.
I've seen things where windshields have been broken, and I've done it with breakaway glass, and I've never been satisfied that it looks right. And we had to play several consecutive scenes after that with that windshield in view, because that car then goes out into a car chase, and it had to look like a real windshield had been broken. So I talked to some special effects people, the mechanical effects people on the film, and we determined that we had to use a real windshield. So the question was, how do we generate the force to get through a real windshield on camera? So we built a steel fist that weighed, I don't know what it weighed, 15, 20 pounds, something like that, and put it on a pneumatic ram that had 300 foot-pounds of pressure behind it, and set it up on a rig. Now, unfortunately, the rig was not mobile. It couldn't be moved at the speed that I wanted the car to be moving, because the car is in motion. So, but you can create the illusion that the car is moving by moving the background. So that's how we wound up putting 45 feet or 50 feet of brick wall on the side of a tractor trailer and moving it the opposite direction by the car with a fixed camera. The illusion works quite well. You really believe that you're moving with a moving car at the moment that it takes place. And then, of course, we put Arnold in front of the hydraulic ram, pneumatic ram, and we have the illusion that he punched through a windshield on a moving car.
Bring the E-fan up. You like? Action eye.
Nice work, effects.
Boy, that team effort really paid off. The next segment of this action scene is carefully discussed between stunt coordinator Ken Fritz, the director, and Arnold's stunt double, Frank Orsatti. It's the continuation of the alley scene, where the Terminator is clinging to the moving car as it races into the streets and crashes into a parked car. Once again, Arnold is brought in for a close-up shot from the sidewalk after being thrown over the cars.
Whatever is will be taken away, and then
You almost don't look at him as you slam his
Oh, yeah,
head.
absolutely,
You're
yeah.
already thinking about how you're going to get in
the
and what you're going to
car,
offer.
using the car as an object for the next move, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A discussion with Jim, Arnold, and the actor playing the police officer takes place to rehearse and time out exactly the physical assault on the officer in the film. Special padding is placed under the outer clothing of the actor to avoid injury when Arnold slams him into the door.
Back, and you go like this, yeah.
Like that.
Then I can go.
Yeah, and that throws him well clear. That's what I want out there.
And now that you've seen what goes into the production of just one 90-second action scene shot over a 2-night period, let's take a look at the completed scene as it appears in the actual film.
Cut.
1L19, I got a hit-and-run felony. Suspect vehicle, late model, gray Ford, headed westbound on 7. He's really moving, punching lights all the way. I'm gonna need an ambulance at 7th and Broadway right now. Hey, hold it! Oh,
All units watch for late model gray Ford, last seen westbound on 7th and Broadway.
We get the best of both worlds. The fastest reflexes modern technology has to offer, onboard computer-assisted memory, and a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming. It is my great pleasure to present to you Robocop.
This week, The Making Of introduces you to the future of law enforcement. Part man, part machine. Robocop. The film is set in the near future, where the crime rate in the country has risen to alarming proportions. One of the hardest hit cities is Old Detroit, where a recent rash of cop killings has the police department searching for a solution to the problem. One of the newest officers in Old Detroit is Murphy, played by Peter Weller.
In comes a man named John Murphy, unsuspecting, good cop, street cop, wife, kid, easygoing guy, wants to support mankind, humanity, do the right thing. Not a tough guy, he's very easygoing. Becomes the unwitting subject of this experiment. Is turned into a robot. Becomes a killing machine. But through a series of circumstances and events, he begins to have a taste of what was once his humanity, and it confuses him. And curiously enough, he starts off on a road of not only vengeance, but a road on rediscovering what it was to be human.
Hello, hi, hey, come on, guys. There's nothing there. Just give me a little bit more there.
For director Paul Verhoeven, Robocop marks not only his first American feature, but also his initial plunge into the special demands of science fiction.
For the slates. Ready? Action! Yeah, jammed is actually the same moment, but we can intercut it, yeah?
I think that he wanted to make the movie, and he did make the movie, for American sensibilities, not for European sensibilities. Still, the obliqueness of it and some of the humor and the wit and the social milieu that the jackpot of little goodies that he throws in is from Europe. So it's tremendously unique.
When I got I think you know that when I got the script for the first time and I saw the title and I read Robocop and then, of course, saw that it was science fiction stuff, and I didn't want to deal with science fiction stuff. I was really, at that moment, living in Europe. I just wanted to do films about realistic elements, yeah? I wanted to do films about the real life. And so after a couple of months later, I think they still hadn't found a director, I got a phone call from somebody at Orion asking me if I had read it, and I said, no, I didn't read it. She said, well, you should certainly read it. And then with a lot of non-very sympathetic feelings, I started to read it. And I was not really completely convinced. It's not like seeing the heavens open or something like that. But when I put it down again, when I read it, it stayed in my mind, and it slowly started to... because what I saw was the possibility to do this kind of science fiction action picture, but that underneath the whole story, there was something about the human mind or the human soul.
I better drive until you know your way around.
I usually drive when I'm breaking in on your partner.
I personally think that this is the best thing Nancy Allen ever did. I personally think that this is the most vulnerable and charming and delightful and moving and touching that I've ever seen her be.
I wasn't sure what you mean.
Nancy Allen plays Ann Lewis, Murphy's former partner, and later the cyborg's one true friend. Allen, best known for her roles in Dressed to Kill and Blowout, found a new challenge in Robocop.
You may not like what you're going to see.
The thing that was really, I mean, all throughout the movie, there's only, Peter and I only have a few scenes in the beginning together as partners, and all the rest of the time I'm playing with the robot, and I was very nervous about how am I going to relate to this creature, you know, and Peter's such a wonderful actor. I mean, there was just, you know, sometimes I'd look at him and is there anyone there? So I think because of how good he is at his job, it made it really easy for me.
Helping Weller make the character of Robocop come to life was the Robocop suit. The costume was designed and created by special effects makeup genius Rob Bottin, whose credits include The Howling and The Thing. Working with a team of 20 assistants, Bottin spent 10 months developing the Robocop suit and 6 months building it. Dennis Pavlik, a member of the team that was responsible for working with the Robocop suit, discusses its creation.
It came from a lot of months of talking to the director, Paul Verhoeven, and them going over what they wanted, sketches, building it out of clay, changing it, a lot of changing. And they finally, you know, agreed on one design. This is what you see.
It took 10 hours to get into it the first time. 10 hours. And then it took 6, and then we got it down to 4, and finally this amazing crew I had and support team, the Robo team, we got it down to a smooth hour and a half every day. It was 128 degrees inside the thing. It was 105 degrees outside. I'm not saying Dallas, Texas, but it was about 128 degrees inside it. I would lose about 3 pounds of water weight a day.
For the robotic situations in the film, you have really to find out how a robotic element in a film can look convincing, that it doesn't look ridiculous or absurd, or you don't accept it at all, or it's an element that is completely out of style with the rest of the picture. So these are all things that are really new, I suppose. You're not talking about another galaxy or something like this. You are talking about our civilization, and you're bringing in robotic elements, and you have to make them convincing to your audience.
Drop the gun. You are under arrest. Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
Sometimes it's really difficult to get these things on paper, yeah? You really have to know the writer and to talk with him and find out what is the common opinion behind what is written in the lines.
It distinguished itself from other robot movies because it's about a guy who becomes a machine. It's a very violent movie. It's sort of a comedy, I think. I mean, if you like a good robot picture, this might be it.
Ed 209, a cannon-fisted enforcement droid, was going to be the answer to old Detroit's crime problem. But when Ed goes haywire, Robocop gets the go-ahead. However, Ed 209 is intent upon reclaiming the title of the future of law enforcement. Producer John Davison hired some of the finest special effects artists in the business to create authenticity within the robots.
One of my earliest recollections of robots is sitting in front of a television set when I was 4 years old watching a local Philadelphia TV show called Mr. Rivets, and it was a man in a cardboard box painted silver. Now, hopefully we've done a little better than that. We have one of the all-star teams of special effects. We have Phil Tippett, Academy Award winner, doing all the stop-motion animation on the robot Ed 209.
Stop-motion animation is a frame-by-frame process where we move the stop-motion model, the arms, legs, the feet, the tail, the eyes, the back, very infinitesimal amounts, and then we take one frame of film and repeat that process again. Take one frame of film, repeat the process, take one frame of film.
We have Pete Coran, who did all the roto effects in the Star Wars pictures. He's doing all our RoboVision shots, all the POVs of the robots.
Give me a grid. Got it. Target. Target. Now follow.
We have Rocco Joffrey, is probably the finest young matte artist in the United States, doing all our matte paintings.
You are illegally parked on private property. You have 20 seconds to move your vehicle.
Action!
One of the pivotal scenes in Robocop was shot in this deserted Dallas, Texas warehouse. Kurtwood Smith portrays Clarence Boddicker, the ruthless leader of the gang that killed Murphy. While Boddicker and his associates are making a drug deal, they are interrupted by Robocop, now seeking revenge upon his executioners.
I've got protection!
You have the right to attorney!
Action will be everybody shooting, yeah? So there will be... And then I do this.
The firepower, stunts, and special effects in Robocop are truly awesome. Here, director Verhoeven consults with special effects man Dale Martin.
On action, our man's going to come in on action. You're going to see the whole wall get machine gunned and back with bullet hits. The glass will pop, the lights and all that. As he moves forward, we'll see some hits of cement, the ground, and then we'll throw some sparks off his body.
So it will be standing like this.
While Martin and his team are preparing the special effects, each scene is being carefully planned out. Because some of the action that will be taking place is considered dangerous, a stunt double for Peter Weller is used. Coordinating a film sequence such as this can be extremely difficult for all involved.
It was extraordinarily taxing physically. Not only that, for the stuntmen, all those guys, with 21 stuntmen, and the time, all of those things at once, while I'm in the suit shooting the gun and they're shooting and 4 cameras are working, and the heat.
Also feeling the heat were the veteran stuntmen involved in the scene. It was Gary Combs' responsibility as stunt coordinator to create the action that was to unfold.
Well, you have this
sequence here, which is a big shootout. The robot comes in the building, kills all the baddies in the building, so that's not super dangerous. So that's just, it requires a number of stunt people, a lot of bullet hits, a lot of blood bags and things like that, which those will all mainly put on stunt people. A couple little high falls, guys on air rams sailing through the air and through glass, being jerked back through barrels and things like that on an air ratchet. You know, the robot shoots you, gets a hold of you, he's superhuman strength, he shoots a lot of firepower, so they want to see the impact of it.
Explosive charges called squibs are placed by the special effects crew. These squibs, when detonated, simulate bullet hits. Special protective vests are used when placing squibs on actors. Here, special effects employ a jerk vest, a special harness worn by the actor with a hook protruding in the back. A wire is attached, and when the squibs explode, the wire is jerked, and the actor will be pulled backwards, giving the effect of being blown away.
Okay, ready? Action! Cut it!
In this case, the film turns out to be much more complicated than you could foresee on paper. There are so many special effects that have never been done, that you have to find out during shooting, and there's nobody who can really help you immediately because you have to find it out all together. I think it's always when you do something new and you try to combine several elements that have never been used together, and you put them together suddenly and you find out that they don't work together, or they work together but you have to find out how.
Another element to be constructed was the design of Robo's gun. Verhoeven called upon Randy Moore to create the robot's artillery.
Coming up with something that's totally different visually that still works. You know, you can make all sorts of great modifications to a gun that looks very visually interesting and have something that doesn't work. So the object is to make it visually interesting and to make it also function.
This guy's really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
What are they gonna do, replace us? Come on.
Portraying Bob Morton, the creator of Robocop, is Miguel Ferrer, a man whose lust for power creates his own downfall.
He's like the most ruthless, ambitious agent who ever sat behind a desk at William Morris. That's how I equate it, you know. The writer calls him a yuppie with teeth. So just a very ambitious, young, sort of up-and-coming, bright guy.
Ferrer, whose credits include Flashpoint and Star Trek III, was looking forward to working for his new director.
The real joy for me, I mean, is working with Paul Verhoeven, you know. Truly, he's just unbelievable. I'm such a fan of his movies like everybody else.
He's a quick and inventive and unsettled guy. And that took getting used to, but once I got used to that, which really didn't take a large adjustment because I'm sort of unsettled and restless. And once I got used to that, we got used to each other, that's where we were going to begin, then it was phenomenal.
Phenomenal is also a good word for the stunts in Robocop. Here, Verhoeven and Gary Combs plan a sequence that will find Clarence Boddicker crashing through a roof and onto the solid floor below. When the stunt is finished being choreographed, placement of cameras are selected, focused, and locked into position. The stunt team prepares by placing several mattresses on the area where Boddicker will land. Kurtwood Smith's stunt double rehearses his movements in this difficult scene. Finally, with cast and crew ready, film can be rolled. Having completed this hazardous act, The stuntman is examined for any injuries. With no harm to account for, it's time to be ushered on to the next location for yet more grueling activity. As the action continues, Kirkwood Smith is brought in for close-ups. Here, Robo encounters his assailant and prepares to hurl him through a plate of glass.
Right. And action. Bomb. And go immediately.
Again, there is no margin for error when executing a hazardous stunt such as this.
Right.
Safety is always of the highest priority, and the stunt coordinator must make sure the act is performed correctly.
You become a technical advisor in certain ways. You become a safety advisor in a lot of ways, you know, because if somebody on the crew gets hurt while you're doing a stunt, it's going to become your responsibility, or they're going to come to me first and say, you know, how come that happened? Why'd the car run over the guy or whatever? So, I mean, in a lot of respects, you became involved in the safety factors of things for the whole crew, not just the stunt people.
And action! And go.
The success of any stunt sequence can be best measured when seen in the final action-packed version of the film.
Come quietly or there will be trouble. You are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent.
Terrorism, a very real-life situation plaguing free nations around the world. In the wake of the growing acts of world terrorism, the United States government has created an elite squadron of highly trained fighting men known as the Delta Force.
We're members of Delta Force and we're here to take you home.
Our cameras are on location in Israel for the filming of Cannon Films' new true-life action-adventure film, The Delta Force. Produced by Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus, The Delta Force stars Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin, who head an all-star cast. Norris plays Major Scott McCoy.
Delta Force deals with a rescue operation of hostages in Beirut. Similar to a situation that happened in America, you know, to American hostages here a while back. I play a member of Delta Force, which is the elite commando organization, military organization, that deals with rescue operations of hostages domestically or internationally, or terrorism primarily.
The Delta Force is directed by Menachem Golan and was shot entirely on location in Israel. The subject and film are close to the heart of Golan, who returned to his native country once again for the filming of Delta Force.
We worked on a screenplay to tell a story of new American heroes, to tell a story of a real modern American drama, which accumulates in it all the different aspects and all the dramatic events of different kind of hijacking, and at the same time tell the story of the Delta Force. It's a story that not many Americans know about.
To create an added atmosphere of realism, director Golan chose to film all of the interior plane scenes in the hot and cramped quarters of an actual Boeing 707. The claustrophobic quarters in 110-degree heat are all too real for the cast members.
Being on this plane, which is an actual plane, and being in the conditions that we are in, it's not too difficult to be real, because it's outrageously hot. We sit on the plane for hours and hours upon end, and the actors are fabulous. So, you know, when you have all those elements going, then therefore the situation becomes very real.
Harry.
What?
Harry, my ring, it's Hebrew.
Take it off. Take it off. Put it in your purse. No, it's fine. It'll be all right. Take it off.
Oh, Harry, look, there's a white mark on my hand. You think they're gonna notice?
Will you marry me?
Oh, Henry, what's gonna happen to us?
Also co-starring in this intense action drama are Joey Bishop, Martin Balsam and Shelley Winters, Susan Strasberg, Robert Forster, Hannah Shigula, George Kennedy, and Bo Svensson as captain of the hijacked plane.
Now, the hijacker has threatened to blow us up. If he does, it'll be your responsibility. Now, do you understand that, Mr. Minister? Do we now have your permission to land?
My answer is definitely not.
For 2 months, the cast of the hijacked plane felt the intensity of the heat, cramped quarters, and the ever-present realization that they were shooting a movie about terrorism in a country that terrorism has plagued many times. Access to the Ben Gurion airport where the large jet was located was very strict. Armed security personnel and military were always present while the cast and crew were filming, which added to the intense drama that was being staged by Golan and the cast of the Delta Force.
You're always aware that you are in a country which is at war. I didn't intend to do this, but you might look at this card. We have to have identity cards like this to get on and off the air base where we're working. Even now as we chat, we're on Ben Gurion Airport, which in addition to being a passenger airport is also a military airfield. So in order to get access, we need these cards with our picture and our name, written in both English and in Hebrew to get here.
George Kennedy plays Father O'Malley, an American priest. The terrorists collect passports and command German stewardess Ingrid, played by Hannah Shigula, to read the names of the Jewish passengers.
Kaplan Benjamin. Mr. Benjamin Kaplan?
This can't be happening. Not now. Not again. Not again. What are you doing? Where are you going? Don't go.
We survived once. We can do it again.
Oh.
I'm coming.
Where are you going? Go back to your
He
seat.
is my husband.
Sit down.
No. I won't listen. No, I won't. Go on. Listen, why don't you all do something? There's only 2 of them. There's so many of you. Why don't you? I don't care. I don't care. She's just upset. She's just upset.
No.
It's the war! It's the war all over again, the concentration camps! Why don't you do something? Something! There's only 2 of them! And there's so many of us! Do something!
In a brave and selfless gesture, Father O'Malley willingly turns himself over to the terrorists, insisting that they're all in this together.
What are you doing here?
You called me.
What is your name?
William O'Malley.
I did not call you.
You call for all the Jews. I'm Jewish, just like Jesus Christ. You take one of us, you gotta take us all. I think the frustration must be for the leader of any country, ours as well as any other, is what to do back without hurting the innocent people that are aboard. That's what happens. So a Delta Force, by any other name, the Israeli force, the American force, or what have you, is a force set to combat that, as they did in Entebbe. But sometimes how to dispatch that force and how to let those people do what they probably do better than anybody on earth must be a tremendously difficult decision for the leader of a country.
Action! I think what we are doing in the Delta Force, we are creating heroes out of people who are involved in crisis in the world, American young people. We took the dramatic license and we changed the end of the, call it the hijack event, using the Delta Force. I hope that the movie will carry a message, first of all, about the way people act under stress, about that America has wonderful people, wonderful youth who can change fate and history, who are very brave and could achieve a fantastic mission. And I hope I'm bringing a message to America that America would love to see.
Even more real are the chase scenes which were filmed in the streets of the ancient city of Jaffa, just outside Tel Aviv. Director Golan chose this little port city for its Middle Eastern character and its architecture, which represents Beirut in the film. During the first few days of shooting, the local telephone company switchboards were inundated with calls from concerned citizens, until the word circulated that the Delta Force was being filmed in their streets. To create the believable stunts and chases, Director Golan commissioned the services of an American team of stuntmen, headed by stunt coordinator Don Pike. Pike is a veteran stuntman and coordinator with over 20 feature films and television shows to his credit. He is considered to be one of the best when it comes to setting up and coordinating thrilling car chases and stunts. Pike handpicked the stunt team, which includes B.J. Davis, Greg Galt, B.J. Worth and Gary Pike, Mike DeLuna, and John Epstein, who also doubles for Chuck Norris. One of Pike's major concerns is safety for everyone on the set.
Safety is a very, very big factor, making sure my men, for instance, if we roll a car or something like that, to make sure that they're all buckled in and everything inside the car is secure, and where they're going to roll, how far they're going to roll. And then I have to think of camera, too, for safety.
One of the many stunts in the chase scene through the streets of Jaffa calls for a Jeep manned by terrorists to overturn and explode. This stunt is called a roll, and Pike and his crew make careful and cautious preparations. A specially designed pipe ramp is placed behind a pile of debris and wooden crates, which will be out of the view of the cameras. At the end of the ramp is an adjustable steel plate called a kicker, which determines the height at which the Jeep will be hurled into the air. The Jeep, which will be driven by Mike DeLuna, must hit the pipe ramp at exactly 35 miles per hour. The Jeep will then be guided up the ramp and create the roll. The stunt is rehearsed several times so that DeLuna can precisely determine the speed and angle that the Jeep must reach to hit the ramp for maximum visual effect. Since this particular scene calls for 2 terrorists to be in the Jeep, a mannequin resembling a terrorist is placed alongside DeLuna and strapped in. Final preparations are made, and the rest of the stunt team secure the safety harness for DeLuna. 4 cameras are placed in strategic locations to film different angles of the Jeep as it hurls through the air and rolls. The director calls for action. The stunt is a success, and Mike DeLuna comes through without a scratch. The explosion of the Jeep itself will be staged separately, and a second mannequin will replace DeLuna. Now, let's take a look at how the scene will appear in the actual film. Lee Marvin found shooting in Jaffa hauntingly realistic.
Visually, you have an area that's been at war for so many, centuries, I guess. So that all, well, I mean, look at our backgrounds. I mean, this is just every day here. And the urgency of the people, there's an urgency in Israel that you don't see in other places. You know, they're very moving, very warm, and very open, all because they have to live so rapidly, in the sense of that they're living under this terrorism that they have here, you know. So they know how to be nice, I mean, immediately, and they know how to be strong immediately. And so that gives an energy to the film. But I think it's a, you know, it's a good example of what terrorism is, and therefore the whole thing, I think, is kind of frightening.
Get down here quick.
What do you want me to do? Jump?
I don't care what you do, make it fast.
Terrorism is really the new disease of the world that has to be, you know, in some way controlled, because it just affects all the wrong people too.
Jim Monahan, a 22-year veteran of the U.S. Army Special Forces, spent 2 weeks training the actors and members of the Israeli Regular Army who served as extras in the Delta Force on the techniques that would be used in the sequence showing the liberation of the hostages from the schoolhouse.
My job is that of being the technical advisor for the film, the military consultant, and working with the stunt coordinator and setting up the military-related stunts that will be seen through this, throughout this film. From what we have been working on and the effort that I have put into it and the effort that some of the actors and the stunt coordinator and the stuntmen have put into it, so far it is following a fairly realistic portrayal.
All that special training and preparation can be seen as Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin lead their squadron in the believable and realistic rescue of the hostages. No action-adventure film with Chuck Norris would be complete without some hair-raising stunts, and the Delta Force is no exception. In this scene, Norris must jump from a moving motorcycle onto a moving truck. Action! Overtake one of the terrorists. Fall off the moving truck to the ground and do battle with his adversary.
That was terrific. Good for us. Terrific.
Each portion of the scene is carefully choreographed by Norris, Golan, and cinematographer David Gerfinkel. Then Norris and stuntman coordinate the moves. Hours of hard work under the hot Israeli sun pay off as the scene comes together. and we see why Chuck Norris is America's premier fighting hero.
In Delta Force, of course, we have a lot of car stuff. I race cars, so they're putting me in a car a lot. I think the more hazardous stuff I'm doing in this film that I haven't done is motorcycle stunts. I'm not really that good on a motorcycle that I am in a car. And so I've been practicing like crazy, trying to develop my skills as a motorcycle rider. But it's something new for me, and that makes it a little more dangerous for me to do.
While Norris and crew are creating action in Israel, a different sort of creation is taking place in a recording studio in Los Angeles. You may never have heard of Alan Silvestri or seen his face on TV or the silver screen, but you've definitely heard his music if you've seen the blockbusters Back to the Future or Romancing the Stone. One of the most talented and in demand of today's feature film music men, Alan Silvestri has brought his talents to the score of the Delta Force. Alan's modern method of composing takes place at the keyboard of a computerized synthesizer called the synclavier. With the use of this amazing electronic device, ordinary sounds like a human voice, a metal bowl, even a gunshot can be turned into a musical instrument. In fact, the entire score for the Delta Force was composed and recorded by Silvestri without the use of a single conventional instrument. Silvestri's realization of the plight of the hostages and the brave and elite fighting team known as Delta Force helped in the composition of the dynamic and powerful theme.
When we are in the midst of hard action, I wanted to come up with something that was hard as well, something that absolutely went in the direction of what we were seeing on the screen. So when Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin and the gang are out there fighting, and our boys are out there fighting the fight and saving the folks, wanted something that had a lot of energy, a lot of power, a fighting spirit in it.
Once Silvestri's score is complete, the music, dialogue, and sound effects are all mixed together in this room to arrive at a finished soundtrack for the film. After completing the grueling and hectic 8-week shooting schedule in Israel, director Golan is now in Los Angeles to supervise this very precise and time-consuming step of filmmaking. Each element must be mixed with the others so that together a certain mood and pace are created, as seen in this portion of the film.
I think terrorism is a big problem all over the world right now. I think the problem's going to get bigger. I think terrorism's going to get greater all over the world. And I think it's time that we started doing something about it right now, rather than waiting until it gets to such a problem that we can't deal with it.
Tonight, we take you behind the scenes into a nightmare landscape of street warriors and vigilantes. We are on the streets of New York for the making of Exterminator 2, a sequel to the hit film The Exterminator, starring Robert Ginty, Deborah Geffner, and Mario Van Peebles, and directed by Mark Buntsman, who is using more than 400 artists and technicians to create non-stop action movie making. Exterminator 2 marks the return of Johnny Long, the Vietnam veteran who is determined to do something to stop the rampant crime and violence on the city's streets, and to do it in his own way, by delivering a lethal dose of vengeance, Exterminator style. Robert Ginty is back once again as the notorious Exterminator. Movie audiences may wonder how an accomplished Shakespearean actor, who has been both a rock and roll singer and a student at Princeton, as well as a familiar face on a peaceful TV show like The Paper Chase, suddenly becomes the guy with the steel helmet and the black suit, who plays judge and jury with a flamethrower.
I read the material and I saw what I could do with the character. I saw immediately that I could humanize this story. It was a very violent story. It's a very reactionary story. It's a story about a vigilante, and it's both scripts, and certainly the first one, if we want to deal with that question, was brutally violent. I mean, almost unnecessarily so, but I think they were trying to prove a point. But what missed is humanizing the character, making him a human being, and giving a reason why someone would do this. I went in another direction. Films that inspired me towards it, things like Straw Dogs or John Voight's performance in Deliverance. I'm a very reluctant man, a man who doesn't like violence at all, but when forced into a situation, then reacts to it violently.
Ginty brings some very human moments to the film in his scenes with Deborah Geffner, who is Caroline. Caroline is Johnny's loving and supportive girlfriend. She's a beautiful dancer struggling for a Broadway career.
I mean, that was beautiful. I love that. Oh, that was wonderful. Look, you're getting a standing ovation here. The crowds are on their feet. It was wonderful. I know this girl, right here.
This warmth and compassion is also evident in Ginty's scenes with Frankie Faison, who plays BG, an old friend who offers Johnny a partnership in his garbage collecting business.
We're going to park this thing.
Anywhere I want to. Hold on.
But the darker side of Johnny Long really comes to life when he finds himself face to face with the evil and ruthless street warrior X, deadly ruler of the dark alleys and deserted subways of the city.
Set fire to the streets. Everything will burn. We will build it up again. We will control it. Make up with my brothers.
The striking young actor Mario Van Peebles auditioned for director Mark Buntsman, but failed to get the part he was looking for.
First of all, I auditioned for the character of BG. I went in, I auditioned for BG, and I did my best Garbage Man. I gave him Garbage Man, baby. I watched Garbage Man. I had Garbage Man gloves. And they said, nah, you just don't look like the Garbage Man type.
Instead, Mario Van Peebles became X, the gang leader with more lofty ambitions than you find in your average street tough.
I am the streets. If you say so. Just so long as the streets stay in Harlem.
Next, I take over the city.
He's such a presence on film that I didn't want to have him as the Exterminator's buddy and have him interfere with the position that the first lead has. And more important than that, I got the idea that as the villain, as X, he'd be an interesting, different choice to make from the regular street punk.
Sort of said, well, what if we took X out and sort of made him sort of a pseudo-antichrist, made him sort of a rebel with a cause, be it a bent cause, right? So, now this is getting interesting.
And I designed the look to be sort of urban road warrior, to have something otherworldish, something old but something new, sort of like a modern gladiator.
Mark Buntsman is making his directorial debut at the helm of Exterminator 2 after serving as producer of the first film in the series. Buntsman's story is a unique one. He never attended film school. He did not spend 10 years on Hollywood's back lots. Yet he had a picture he wanted to make, and he found a way to make it.
It's a project that I was able to put together completely outside the industry, without industry resources and without really knowing a lot of people. Just by working on a concept that worked, that people wanted the product. They didn't necessarily know me from Adam or think that that's what they were hiring. They were hiring the work, and that's kind of what I was proud of.
Damn, that was good. Yeah.
So the Exterminator is back. But how did he get here? Doesn't common sense tell us that he was demolished at the end of Exterminator Part 1?
They think they shot him. They did not. He was wearing this bulletproof vest very conveniently. And he disappears, still alive. And now we pick him up. And it is 3 years later.
No matter how the Exterminator escaped, he wouldn't be the Exterminator unless we found him once again walking around like a Sherman tank with legs and breathing fire like Godzilla.
Oh, no!
The Exterminator films depend on rapid-fire action, which must be carefully choreographed down to the finest detail. Director Mark Buntsman has developed elaborate floor plans to map out every scene in the film. He must manage his actors both skillfully and realistically so movie audiences will believe what they're seeing. But perhaps his most important job during these weeks of shooting is to make the best use of his huge cast and crew so that the day moves along quickly and efficiently.
Well, the key thing, I think, for an action film is a lot of preparation. You know, if you're rehearsing a scene with an actor and he might miss his mark, he'll be a little bit out of focus and you can do the shot again. It costs you a little time. But if you have a truck spinning on a wet street and it misses his mark and mows over the camera crew, you've got a big mistake on your hands. So it's just an extraordinary amount of detail, and hopefully you have enough time to plan it all out and do it so that it's just chipping off a piece of it each day.
To build the non-stop action sequence in the film when X's band of thugs arrive to put an end to the Exterminator's one-man army, Buntsman is everywhere. He's huddling with his key crew members to review the scene. He makes final preparations for the elaborate stunt work with stunt coordinator Ted Duncan. He stands right next to the cameraman in order to understand exactly how the camera will capture the scene. The scene must be put together in stages. First, a master shot is set up with the cars driving into the warehouse, streaming past a menacing silhouette of the street warrior X. This shot is of primary importance because it communicates the geography of the scene to the audience. Once the audience has its bearings, the rest of the scene will make perfect visual sense. Then Director Buntsman and his crew move in for the particulars. The individual shots, which operate like pieces of a puzzle, filling an action scene with its exciting moments. Cars full of gang members arrive in one section of the warehouse. The actors must not only make their cars hit the cameraman's marks, they must also climb out of the cars on cue and keep the action moving. When the director doesn't like the look of the first take, he uses his own energy to coax a performance out of his youthful cast members, to demonstrate to them the kind of feeling he wants them to create. He must be careful not to be overbearing. He doesn't want them to give up their best instincts. He wants to stimulate them to do it their own way.
It's like you want instructions. Red Rat's in charge here. You know what's happening. Okay?
Even this small piece of a much larger action scene requires a number of angles which Director Buntsman and directors of photography Bob Baldwin and Joseph Mangine want to capture. Then a second closer angle picks up the gang as they quickly bolt out of the car door. The notorious garbage truck, the Exterminator's big lumbering co-star in the film, requires a third camera angle. It will provide a dramatic glimpse of the bad guys as the truck plows toward them. Finally, a high-angle camera is used to show the size of the warehouse, to make it look and feel like a battlefield. In addition to planning the photographic coverage of the scene, the director also must make sure the screen direction and the eye lines are working. In order for the film to cut together properly, each actor must be looking and moving in exactly the right direction. The scene also is the responsibility of weapons armor Danny Kershoff and his crew, who not only prepare the firearms, but they must also show the actors how to handle the kind of weapons they're not likely to find at a local firing range. A bazooka, for example. The bazooka explosions are created by a small black gunpowder bomb detonated by a battery-powered device in the handle of the weapon. The actors are given a full rehearsal with their weapons in order to synchronize their movements. Finally, the scene is shot with the bazookas and the automatic rifles, resulting in a hail of gunfire. The final stage of the battle scene is to prepare the truck for its performance as a battering ram. First, a smoky atmosphere is created for the scene, and then it's off to the races. Explosions are detonated all around the truck. And then the garbage truck is driven by stunt driver Billy and Agnes through a row of cars toward the film camera. When the scene is completed, the crew rushes in with fire extinguishers to douse the flames. It's been a full day for Mark Buntsman and his crew. Now let's finally have a look at how these lengthy preparations come together in the final version of the battle scene in Exterminator 2. In a film like Exterminator 2, chock full of action and special effects, movie audiences tend to take for granted how the actors feel when the script calls for them to strangle someone to death or when they're on the screen carrying guns. For example, in this scene when Exterminator Johnny Long loses his best friend BG in a hail of gunfire. It's actor Mario Van Peebles up there on the screen firing away with an Uzi machine gun and wearing a grin as wide as a Cheshire cat. That's not a feeling many of us experience in our everyday lives, but for the actor to make us believe it, he must feel it himself.
What scared me most about doing the role was not just doing the role, but getting into it and enjoying it. I mean, that gun, the Uzi that I had when I shot BG on the truck, and playing X, there was this sense of power, and it became a part of me, and I did things that I was like, whoa, Mario, that's you. It reminded me of playing football and hitting guys and saying, ugh, it feels good, I like it.
In fact, the camaraderie between Mario and the actors who play the members of his gang was still there long after filming had been completed.
At a club, and got into a fight. And one of the guys from Exterminator was there, the guy that was a roller skater, and immediately responded just like my right-hand man in X, in Exterminator. I mean, we would go around and would respond to each other like the gang.
For Robert Ginty, the reality of the character he plays is no less personal.
So I really have a violent instinct in me. I mean, it'd be very hard to, as a human being, I could never do what I do as an actor. But maybe there's obviously a part of me that is capable of that, and I act it out as an actor.
Though the actors on Exterminator 2 can sometimes reach the boiling point, it's nothing like the feeling on the set when it comes time to perform the extremely dangerous fire stunts. Stunt coordinator Ted Duncan is in charge, and he's one of the best in the business. But this particular fire stunt is one which even Ted Duncan has never attempted before. His job is to have a record 5 men burning in a single scene. He must not only observe traditional safety precautions, but must carefully plan how the 5 men can move freely and dramatically without endangering one another. Exterminator 2's director has tremendous respect for what Ted Duncan brings to a film.
He knows how to draw that very fine line between really being safe and protecting the stuntmen and the other people on the set, and also putting the shot together in a way that really sells it dramatically.
The first step is to shoot Robert Ginty firing the notorious flamethrower high above the set where the stuntmen will be burned. Then there is a rehearsal of the 5 men who will perform the stunt. Under Ted's watchful eye, the guys walk in, and there's a simulation first of the application of the non-flammable gelatin, and then of the flames being ignited. Finally, just like the actors in the film, the stuntmen must rehearse their movements very carefully. They must know precisely where they are going. One mistake, and there could be a serious injury. Now it's for real. To build the scene, a barrel filled with water, which will appear to be gasoline in the film, is slowly lowered over the area where the stuntmen will be burned. And after a final warning by Assistant Director Kelly Van Horn and a final look by Director Mark Buntsman, the stuntmen are costumed in their fireproof asbestos clothing, and every inch of their exposed skin is coated with a clear, non-flammable gelatin. The gelatin must be applied with the utmost care and precision. It is the only thing that protects these men from serious injury. There is no margin for error. One mistake could be fatal. New York firemen and paramedics are standing by just in case something goes wrong. And there is one final concern which Ted Duncan must leave to his stuntmen.
Here's while you're breathing, you're got to hold your breath, get into the wind, and take your breath, and then let it out while the fire is blowing away from you. If you turn and it whips around in front of you and you get a face full of fire, then you got it in your lungs and it sears the lungs.
Finally, the torches are ignited, and as the entire crew holds their breath, Ted Duncan gives the signal to light the bodies. The men are on fire. A cue is quickly given to an operator of the high-speed camera, which will give the scene a devastating slow-motion effect. The men begin to stagger, careful not to collide into one another, searching for their prearranged destinations where the flames are extinguished. The stunt has been a success, and nobody is more relieved than stunt coordinator Ted Duncan.
We all had nice timing. Nobody else would. Everybody stayed in camera. Thank God.
Director Mark Buntsman may have had a few anxious moments himself, but he also is very pleased at the result.
They stayed out here for a real long time, played to all the cameras.
You've just seen how one of Hollywood's most dangerous stunts is done. Now, let's have a look at how it appears in the final version of Exterminator 2.
Tonight, the making of travels to a tropical paradise, the beautiful island of St. Kitts in the West Indies, where movie makers have come not for the deep blue waters of the Caribbean or for a rich island history which dates back to Christopher Columbus in the 15th century. They've come to work in the thick jungle landscape high atop St. Kitts' towering peak Mount Misery, and they've recreated the look and the feeling of a North Vietnamese prisoner of war camp. The film is Missing in Action: The Beginning, a sequel to the box office smash Missing in Action. It stars former world karate champion Chuck Norris, who in a few short years has become the premier fighting hero of the American cinema. Missing in Action: The Beginning is about American prisoners of war and the tortures and suffering they endure at the hands of their North Vietnamese captors. It is a story of a fierce battle of wills between Colonel James Braddock, played by Chuck Norris, leader of the American prisoners, and the North Vietnamese Colonel Yin, played by Soon Tek O, the ruthless overseer of the camp.
You are surrounded by cliffs, mountains, jungles full of man traps, and a bridge that is impassable. None of you have ever escaped, and none of you will. The only way for you to leave my camp is if Braddock confesses. He defends the country that has forgotten you, an outlaw nation the rest of the world reviles.
To transform the dense jungle foliage into a prisoner of war camp, local laborers hacked away with machetes for 2 months before the rest of the cast and crew arrived. 99% of the materials required to build the authentic sprawling set were harvested right on the spot. Over 20,000 pieces of bamboo. Even a road had to be plowed up the mountainside to create a passage for director Lance Houle and his crew.
Approximately took about 2 months to complete. It was a difficult thing to do. We brought in quite a few heads of departments from the United States, Florida, and Los Angeles. But we had employed at one time or another approximately 300 local laborers. As you know, the road we had to build the road, and every morning now it's like traveling a highway compared to the way we first got up here. It took a Land Rover and about an hour and a half of bumpy road to get here. And of course now we got a helicopter, so we travel in comfort. But it was quite a feat. It was a tremendous feat, actually.
For actor Chuck Norris, Missing in Action is not just another martial arts movie. It presents an opportunity to alert film audiences to the plight of American prisoners of war. The issue is of great personal significance to Norris, and he is tackling it with the same careful attention to detail that he has brought to his martial arts training.
We did a lot of research before we did the film, and a lot of the tortures that are inflicted on these men were tortures that were inflicted on the prisoners of war during the Vietnam War. And it's kind of a personal thing with me because I lost a brother in Vietnam. And I still believe there are men in Vietnam that are missing in action. And this is a movie that's kind of a tribute to these men. And I think that the veterans who see this movie will feel the realism that we do project in this film.
A concern for realism extends to Chuck Norris's performance as well. The highly charged emotional moments in the film allow Norris, for the first time, to reach inside himself, to prove that he can be a compelling actor, as well as a dynamic fighting hero.
He's not dead! He's not dead! God, no! Oh, God!
There's a lot of human relationships in this film here. 5 men who have been missing in action for 7 years in Vietnam. And the relationships that these guys have developed, a very close bond, brotherhood type of relationship, dealing with the atrocities that are inflicted on them by this camp commander.
In a film like Missing in Action: The Beginning, every component involved in capturing the look and feeling of the prisoner of war camp is important. Asian actors were brought from North Carolina to be extras, both North Vietnamese soldiers and South Vietnamese prisoners.
So we'll use 1, 2, 3, 4.
They must be carefully selected by the assistant directors before each scene begins.
Okay, action! Action!
Then, they must be drilled over and over again until the tone and movement of the scene is exactly right.
Guards, more yelling! Let's go, waving the arms. Guards, wave the arms. Let's go.
The job of the makeup department begins very early in the morning, providing Chuck Norris with the weather-beaten, spiritless look of a prisoner of war. Makeup artist Lily Benyar first paints on the dark, tired eyes. Then, with an artist's precision, she etches the appropriate cuts and abrasions into his arms. Finally, his hair is rubbed with mud to give it the right, matted, unwashed look. The extras must be prepared as well. Here, mud is powdered on to a South Vietnamese prisoner. And remembering when and where the blood goes is not just the responsibility of the makeup department. Even the leading man gets into the act.
Do I have all this blood on her? Tell her to take the blood off. Bila, can you take this blood off? Do you have the stuff to take this stuff off?
To match Chuck's arm in the previous scene, the blood must come off. It's painless. Playing the leading part in a motion picture is not always what it's cracked up to be. Repeating a piece of action to get it right can be an extremely painstaking and often unglamorous process. But finally, as a reward for a hard day's work and a job well done, Chuck Norris can be released from his leg irons. Lance Houle has a number of well-known pictures to his credit as a producer, but Missing in Action: The Beginning is Houle's first opportunity to direct. He is finding the experience to be a different kind of challenge. It's exciting, and it never lets up.
I never really knew how difficult a job it is when you try to be a perfectionist about it. I never had to take Melux before in my life, and this is the first time I've had to do it. Definitely producing is a different kind of worry. This is a 24-hour, minute-by-minute worry about what's going to happen, what you did that you would like to do another way.
Part of Lance Houle's approach to the problem of inexperience is to surround himself with some very experienced hands, like the talented Mexican director of photography, Jorge Stahl, veteran assistant director Joe Ochoa, who operates the set like a field general, special effects maestro Dick Parker, who parted the sea for Moses in the Ten Commandments, and Chuck Norris himself, who is starring in his 10th motion picture.
Lance Houle, who's the director on the film, is a fantastic man, and I think he's going to be a very good director. It's his first film, so he's learning as he goes. But he's very, very cooperative, and he's given me a lot of latitude. He takes a lot of suggestions from me, and when you come into a film and you think that you're the auteur person, where you know it all, see, then of course you're defeating a lot of purposes. But Lance isn't that way.
The admiration is mutual. Director Houle is very impressed with the talents of his leading man.
I think Chuck's been underrated. I think he's a very strong actor, and this part has been designed for a strong, silent type. It is a very demanding acting part. It all revolves around his character, and I think that Chuck is going to surprise a lot of people. He is very, very good in this picture.
Colonel Yen, for the atrocities inflicted on the Vietnamese and American prisoners of this camp, I sentence you to death. I didn't want to do what we consider chop-socky movies, you know, kung fu movies where you start with a fight and you end with a fight, and there's no acting, no script, no direction at all. That's not the kind of movies I wanted to do. I did one, and that was all I could handle. I wanted to do movies that had depth. And when I did a fight scene, of course, then, or when I got into an altercation physically, that I was able to use the karate type of fighting. Because in the 80s, that's what people do. You know, they don't fight like John Wayne did in the 50s. That's the obsolete method. If I fought like that, they say, well, gee, you know, he doesn't even know how to fight. So I have to use the more modern version of fighting on the screen, which is the martial arts.
No Chuck Norris film is complete without a hair-raising display of Norris's fighting prowess. There is only one martial arts sequence in Missing in Action: The Beginning, and it comes at the end. After 10 films, Chuck Norris knows the importance of the final fight scene.
I think it's going to turn out to be a very, very good fight scene at the end. It has to be, because it's the climatic ending, and it has to, I have to pay back all the things that he has done to all of us. If I don't pay him back, then you lose the film.
Soon Tech-O must know exactly where Chuck Norris's kicks and punches are going to land. One small mistake, and there could be a serious injury.
When you do a fight scene, it's not only the giving, it's the receiving. If the guy doesn't react properly, no matter how good you punch or kick, it's not going to look good unless the guy reacts properly to it. And so it's a give-and-take situation when you do fights.
A Chuck Norris fight scene owes more to the quick-stepping talent of Fred Astaire than to the old movie brawls in a Western saloon. Norris carefully reviews his fighting choreography with his stunt coordinators, who play as important a role in a Chuck Norris film as anyone on the cast or crew.
Yeah, I have a support team that helps me on my films. My brother, of course, Aaron, who is the leader of the support team, he's my stunt coordinator. Then I have John Barrett, you know, Tom Elliott on this film here, and Dean Ferradini. These are with my main support team on this film here. And they lend a lot for me, because being basically an action type of a film, you know, you can get a lot of suggestions from these men. And when you see this movie, you'll see some of the most fantastic stunts you've ever seen. There's been some burn scenes on this movie that are as spectacular as any movie you've ever seen before. And it's because of the experience of these men that I work with that make it.
Soon Tech-O has 20 years of martial arts experience. He takes pride in the mental as well as physical preparation required for the fight scene. Here, John Barrett, standing in for Soon Tech, poises himself like an Olympic gymnast. He will leap backward as Norris strikes a blow.
Yeah, I'm going up. Ready?
Barrett also doubles for Soon Tech in the difficult acrobatic segments of the fight sequence. In the scene from the actual film, see if you can tell when Soon Tech is doing his own fighting and when Barrett replaces him.
Not yet.
Spin!
One of the highlights of Missing in Action: The Beginning is the wide range of special effects supervised by effects wizard Dick Parker, whose credits include such epics as Patton, The Battle of the Bulge, and The Ten Commandments. On Missing in Action: The Beginning, Parker's responsibilities include the major explosions and minor pyrotechnics, like the smoldering flames crackling through Colonel Yin's headquarters. When a scene is shot a second time, Dick Parker's crews are ready in an instant to ignite the flames once again, with careful attention to both the look of the film and the safety of the actors.
Anytime you work with explosives, it's possible to die. If you make a mistake, if you break the rules, let's say, it's very possible to kill yourself. And we, unfortunately, have had a lot of our effects people over the years being killed by making mistakes. So I have a very set of rules that I follow, and if somebody breaks the rules, I'm very willing to throw them right off of the set, even if it would be the best man I have.
For the first explosion in the film, the effects crew sets dynamite charges, which will send a blazing fire through the headquarters of Colonel Yin. The object is for the interior of the structure to be charred but not destroyed. One mistake, and the building will be demolished, and weeks of shooting will be lost.
Speed!
Speed!
Okay, hit it, Joe.
The crew is right on the spot to douse the flames with water before they can do more damage to the set than is required. Now, watch carefully as the moments we have just witnessed come together in the actual film.
Nobody could live through this.
Colonel.
For the final explosion in the film, enough dynamite will be used to send a shudder through the entire island.
What we need is something that's very effective as far as look. So this explosion, in place of being one thing, will be a composite of maybe 15 or 18 separate explosions, but they'll be done where they're practically together, but a fraction of a second apart. And if you did the whole thing in one explosion, you'd have to go down to the bottom of the canyon because it would be so hard that somebody would get hurt.
Multiple cameras are used to capture the explosion. A remote high-speed camera is hidden in camouflage and protected from flying debris. A second camera is mounted on a tower high above the camp, and a third is rigged in a helicopter which will provide an aerial view. The additional camera angles will cause the explosion to appear more powerful to the audience. Director Lance Houle reviews his preparations with Director of Photography Jorge Stahl.
In other words, when the product comes right to us, and when he's there, he says, "You lose," the explosion goes off, and he walks out of frame, and then the helicopter goes up, shooting the thing as if it were his point of view from the helicopter.
Dynamite is planted throughout the bamboo foundation of Colonel Yin's headquarters. Dick Parker's explosive specialists work right alongside local laborers. Primer cord is rigged and holes are drilled for the dynamite. The mood is casual, yet extremely careful.
This is dynamite here, and the primer cord, just running our leads for our primer, and it should make a hell of an explosion.
To capture the impact of the blast, our making of camera is positioned only 75 feet away. Now watch the explosion very carefully. Then observe how the multiple cameras enhance the look and feeling in the actual film. When it is all over, the cast and crew are relieved that the explosions have been captured on film and no one has been hurt. Dick Parker's operation has been a success.
Okay, let's get those. What is it you carry in that satchel anyway?
Huh?
What is it you keep?
A little tiny A-bomb.
A thermo nuke.